Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Zero to Empire podcast. In this episode, I have Loren Ecker, and he's actually the founder and therapist of the Therapist Queen's Relationship Counseling. And we're going to be going over his background, his story, what actually inspired him to have found that business, become a therapist, and go into all that. So, here's Lauren, and what actually inspired you to become a relationship therapist and counselor?
Well, relationships have always been very meaningful to me, and I recognized early on the importance of being able to be in a relationship that was healthy, as opposed to one that was um, unhealthy and disempowering. I saw, early on in my life how damaging that could be, and uh, when I figured out that I wanted to be a therapist, I knew that relationships was something that I really wanted to focus on.
That's solid. And what specifically drew you to couples counseling over any other fields in that niche?
Well, again, it was the element of relationship that really inspired me to become a couples counselor. Um, the relationships are they're so important to our life, to our well-being, to our emotional stability. It's not easy to be alone in this world, and much of how we feel is really dependent on the quality of our relationships. So it's something that's just very important to me. And I felt a draw and a pull towards that, and I feel like I have a good sense of what a good relationship is. So.
Nice, that's solid. And what would you say is the biggest challenge you face when you actually started your therapy business?
Well, I initially started as a therapist in an outpatient mental health clinic, which it's like a 9 to 5 sort of position where they give you the clients and you see them, throughout the day. So to make a transition from a full-time job to a full-time practice is quite challenging because you can't go from a full caseload in a clinic straight to a full caseload in a private practice. So I had to like slowly transition. I had to see clients on the weekend. I rented an office in the neighborhood, and then slowly you build. Here one day you try to fill up one day for your private practice, and then one day turns into 2 days, and eventually, you're split between the clinic and your practice. But it's a slow progression. It was like that for a while, and then once I took the leap to fully private practice, I wasn't completely full, so I had to really hustle and try my best to fill up my practice to make it worth it.
Yeah, that's solid. And that's really cool that you were working on the weekends and making sure that you're still meeting with your current clients, but also trying to expand. And when it comes to your ideal clients, how do you determine who they are and if you can help them?
My ideal clients are people who are self-motivated to grow and to change. They've probably run into some kind of crisis, and they're almost desperate to get help with it. Um, my ideal client doesn't have to be desperate, but I would like them to have some kind of self-awareness, or at least interested in building self-awareness. Somebody who is open and receptive and curious. Um, Someone who is going to be honest and want is would risk being vulnerable and looking at themselves in an honest way. um yeah, somebody that really wants to grow and improve their life, and realizes that sometimes they just need a space in which they can talk about what's going on and hopefully get some perspective and maybe some advice or guidance, that kind of thing.
Nice. And when it comes to of the session, how does it look? Do you do teletherapy? Is it in person? How do you go about that?
I do both. I really, I offer both in person and telehealth. Um, I prefer seeing people in person. I feel there's just like an intimacy that you can achieve that you can't necessarily fully online. Although I have many clients I see online, and I feel that we have very positive outcomes. So really, I leave it up to the client what works best for them, but I try to encourage them to come into the office.
Yeah, being face to face is definitely different, but it does help to have teletherapy just in case. And would you say has been the most rewarding moment so far, or one of the most rewarding moments when it comes to being a therapist as your career?
Oh wow, it's hard to limit it to just one thing. I have clients that come to me who are single and they want to get married, and eventually they do get married, and that's very exciting. Or then they have a child, and that's exciting. It's also exciting when you have a couple who have been feeling very distant from one another, and they've there's been resentment, there's been distance, and walls have been set up. And if you could help them even just a little bit feel a little more closer, help them to um, help them to access their vulnerability and to share that vulnerability with their partner, and their partner can feel some kind of empathy for them, whereas prior to that it had been so hard to feel empathy for one another, and you can actually see it happen in the office. I like to establish like enactments, so I'll have one of the partners in a vulnerable way turn and speak out their feelings, and in my office they have a good chance of getting the adequate responsiveness that they might not get at home. And so that you can see when that happens in real time, it's quite moving. So those moments are very rewarding.
Oh yeah, that definitely sounds rewarding and inspirational. Keeping your career going, that's awesome. And when it comes to a common relationship issue that most couples face that they don't have, what would that be?
Well, I talk a lot about the 5 losing strategies of getting what you want in my practice. And the first one, I'd say almost every couple that comes to see me struggles with, and that's called being right. Like, the couples try to solve their problems and work out their differences by proving to the other one why they're right and their partner is wrong, or why their memory of something was more accurate than their partner's memory recollection of it. And I tell them, when it comes to relationships, there's no right and wrong. It doesn't matter. The answer of who's right and who's wrong when it comes to relationships is who cares. They cannot solve their differences through objectivity or through logic. Somebody feels the way they feel, they're not going to care what you think until they think that you care. That's that old saying. So somebody feels a certain way, they want to know that you understand how they feel before they're willing to even hear your side of the story. It doesn't matter if a person says that, you were yelling at me and I didn't like it, and the other person says I wasn't yelling. Like, it's not going to make a dent. The person is going to feel like he or she was yelled at. So the other person has to say, okay, I'm sorry that I yelled at you. Like, acknowledge that the person felt yelled at, and then that person's nervous system can relax, and they can open up and have a conversation. So I'd say most couples, if not all couples, struggle with this problem of trying to be right.
Yeah, I can see that definitely being a common issue. And when it comes to a piece of relationship advice, what would you say is some of your best advice that you can give out there?
I'd say try to be nice. Try to be nice to one another. Everybody is dealing with something. Everybody is dealing with some kind of pain or trouble or stress. Try to make some room and understand that people's reactions aren't always even though they're directed at you, it's not always about you. So if you can like remember that and try to have some compassion for your partner and give them some grace and just be nice, sometimes that can like diffuse a lot of, bad feelings that are going on.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And when it comes to you being a therapist and helping all these relationships happen, like improve, get better, how has it actually changed your approach to relationships in your own personal life?
Um, yeah, I see how hard it is. I see how hard it is to change, and I think it's allowed me to see my wife probably more empathetically. So,
That makes sense.
yeah.
And where do you see your therapy business in the next 5 years?
Probably still seeing couples. I would like to one day maybe have some associates that might work under me. Maybe open up another office in another location, and maybe even start to present on some of the the things I've learned about couples and relationships, and maybe teach something like that.
Yeah, that'd be really cool for to see that on your behalf. And if you could go back and give yourself advice at the start of your career, going into therapy or anything, what would it be?
Yeah, I think you really need some good supervision when you're first getting started. So get yourself a good supervisor, stick with him or her, maybe even get some therapy. It's good when you're in therapy, you remember what it's like to be on the other side, like to be a client and what feels good, what a therapist does that feels good to you. And sometimes that's, you can recreate that in your own sessions. So that's something I would tell my old self or my younger
Yeah,
self.
exactly. Yeah. And what's one thing about therapy that you wish more people understood?
You don't have to be sick to go to therapy. I mean, therapy is just a good place to like get some resolve to do those things that you really want to do, but for some reason there's just something standing in your way. And oftentimes therapy is that lubricant, that allows you to just take that next step forward.
Yeah, that makes sense. And where can people actually contact you or book a session with you if they would like to have you as your therapist?
Sure. I have a website. It's relationship-repair.com. That's relationship with a little hyphen, repair.com. Or they can call me at 917-540-6922. They could text me at the same number, 917-540-6922. And we could talk. I offer a 10-minute free Zoom or phone call. If you go to my website, you can schedule a time to do that with me. See if it makes sense to, after we talk, if it makes sense to book an appointment. And that's probably the best ways to get in touch with me.
That's solid. If you would like therapy, make sure to check out Lauren out. He's a great therapist and definitely changing people's lives, especially couples. And yeah, thanks so much for being on the podcast. And for everyone listening or watching in, I'll see everyone in the next episode of Zero to Empire.
Thanks, Sam.